So welcome. We are live streaming here from the Republican State Convention in Houston, Texas. I'm here with Congressman Chip Roy. Most people don't know this, but this convention is the largest political gathering ever in the United States, the second largest in the world next to the Chinese Communist Party's convention. And so I say it's the only one where freedom actually matters and the delegates get to do something. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
I bet the Chinese Communist Convention is really something to behold.
No kidding. I feel like the votes are already cast before people show up. You know, they already know
it's
what's
kind of
happening.
like the House of Representatives, but that's another story.
So tell us a little bit, Chip, one of the things you fought for that I think people don't at home always understand is that you believe that there should be regular order of business in Congress. Yeah. You think that congressmen should actually have to vote themselves, that the other congressmen shouldn't be able to vote for them. Can you tell us about some of kind of the process-oriented fights that you've been having in Congress?
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, it's great to be in Texas. I flew in this morning from D.C. We had an interview with Tucker last night, and one of the things I talked to other people around D.C. about is, people complain and say, well, why don't you guys do what you said you were going to do? Well, the reason is because they can do all this stuff behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. And the leadership comes in, they cut some deal, and then they drop a 2,000-page bill, and then it's like take it or leave it. And then they go give a press conference. And I say, you know what? It's odd that over the last 6 years, not one member of the House of Representatives has been able to offer an amendment on the floor of the House. I think that's a little odd. I think it's a little odd that they passed proxy voting, and you've got virtually the entire body, including Republicans, who are giving their voting card effectively to another member of Congress and allowing them to vote for them. This is the stuff that's ripping apart the institution. I don't know what people are afraid of. Sometimes you got to take tough votes, right? I mean, next week we're going to have a vote on burn pits, right, which is a horrible reality. Our veterans suffering from it. But right now the bill in the Senate is heavily flawed. It creates a massive new entitlement. It's something like $300 to $600 billion. We don't even know yet. So what am I going to do? Run away from the tough vote of trying to be fiscally responsible and do the right thing while protecting veterans? No, our guys want to package this stuff together and lock arms and say we got to do it for the good instead of being responsible. And I think we should change that.
When you take away the ability for members to offer an amendment, what this effectively does is you take an entire bill and you have to vote up or down on the entire thing. You couldn't take a look at the bill and say, look, I support 95% of this legislation, but there's 5% that I think a majority of us, if we discuss, might remove from the bill. We do that in the Texas House, but in the U.S. House, they don't even have that process or procedure.
No, the way it has worked for 6 years, literally now 6 years. My friend Justin Amash tweets about this, Thomas Massey and others, where we are not allowed to go on the floor of the House right now and offer an amendment in open debate. That doesn't mean there aren't amendments on the floor, but they're just pre-cooked. So you go to the Rules Committee and you say, well, here's a 2,000-page, $1.5 trillion appropriations bill. Yep. And then they'll say, well, we need about 5 or 6 or 10 amendments. So they offer the amendments, but all the leadership people figure it out. It's basically just pieces of the bill in amendment form. And then they bring it to the floor. We have 4 or 5 votes on amendments, which are not really amendments. We vote on a bill, and it's garbage. And then I vote no, and then I go to a camera in a press conference, and I say that's garbage. Yep. But that's no way to legislate. Yep. Like, we ought to be able to amend. We ought to be able to fight to change things. We ought to be able to cut spending. You shouldn't put me in the position of having to vote against a veterans bill or a bill that is actually meritorious for our defense without being able to offer an amendment to say, look, I would support that, but I want this change. I never get to do that, and so it's vote no, and they do that on purpose. They do it on purpose because they know you can't vote against a bill that says puppies or kids or, say, infant formula, right? I voted against infant formula because it was a bad bill.
Yep. Yeah. So what are you doing to ensure, because I think Republicans are looking great. We just won CD 34 down in the Valley. We're seeing massive gains, especially amongst Hispanics, but a lot of voters are just really concerned about the direction of the country. What are you doing to make sure that if Republicans take over Congress, we actually do something with that? And my second question to that is, what should we do? What do you think Republicans should do if they take control of Congress and the Senate and they still have a Democrat president?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that Republicans shouldn't get all big-chested and think that they're just going to waltz through next January because we're going to have a good November. I think we're going to have a good November. I think Myra Flores was a leading indicator of that, but it's a leading indicator because Democrats have wide-open borders, because people are getting hurt and people are ticked off about it, including Hispanic Americans in South Texas. But if Republicans take that for granted, they're going to get punted to the curb as fast as they got back in power. We need to actually do something. We need to stop spending money we don't have. We need to secure the border and actually fight to do it. It's not enough to introduce a bill. Go down and stop funding the DHS that is not securing the border. Like this September 30th, we're going to vote to fund the government again. Why should we give money to DHS if they're not securing the border? Stop it. Now, every Republican should be asked that question. And then we're going to go in November and we say, well, we won, yay, Republicans. Well, what good is it to have Republicans in office if they're just doing the same crap the Democrats are doing? So we should defund DHS. We should have a fight in September. We should have a fight in January. We should stop spending money we don't have, secure the border of the United States. But we should also end woke government. Right? We should stop all this stuff with equity and diversity and all this stuff with respect to critical race theory. And we ought to stand in the way of that, whether it's at the military academies or DOD. We should stop allowing the Department of Justice to target parents. We should stop funding those. And at the end of the day, we should remember that the American people sent us there to do what we said we would do and actually to transform the country. But if we're in the majority in the House and Biden is in the White House, we have one job. Two jobs. Stop Biden and then fund responsibly. Limit the amount of money we're giving to the bureaucrats and the tyrants who are trying to kill us.
Two last questions because I know you're busy, and thank you so much for giving us some time. You get pulled all over the place. I've got two last questions. One, you have been one of the congressmen that's not only talked about what D.C. can do, but what Texas can do to secure its own border. And you've been an advocate for federalism since the time you stepped into the halls of Congress and actually advocated that the states step in. There are things that you have advocated for Texas to do that we've currently not done. Can you tell the viewers back at home what are some of those policies that you've been asking Texas to do that you think would have a stronger impact as somebody who's been down to the border probably more than almost any other congressman?
Yeah, I go to the border often. I'm going to go to the border again in a couple of weeks. The border, however bad you think it is, it's worse. We just got the numbers for May. Almost 250,000 apprehensions. We're now over 800,000 known gotaways. We had another 1,200 pounds of fentanyl intercepted, but that's what's intercepted. That's not the fentanyl that's getting through. We had 107,000 people who died from either overdoses or poisonings from fentanyl. The cartels are getting enriched. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars. We're destabilizing not just our own national security, but the entire Western Hemisphere. We're allowing China to exploit it. I could go on and on and on. The administration is doing that, and Republicans aren't fighting back, because if you were going to fight back, you wouldn't fund those guys. You'd stop it. So if you're Texas, you're on the front lines of this. The legislature appropriates $3 billion. Look, I applaud the effort. I applaud DPS. If you ask Border Patrol, they'll tell you without DPS, they'd be literally getting overrun. I applaud putting containers. I applaud the razor wire. I applaud the efforts. But if you still have 250,000 people coming, and if you still have 2,000 people a day coming across that are known gotaways, if you still have fentanyl coming across, well, I think we need to do more. And under the Constitution, this is an invasion. Texas should act like it's an invasion. And I don't say that lightly, right? The governor, McCraw, our guys in law enforcement, that's a big deal. The same radical leftists that went after 19 law enforcement in Austin and have sued them because they were securing the streets of Austin during the riots, those same radical leftists will go after our guys if they do the job of the federal government and turn people away. But we Texans need to rally around them, protect them, and do our job to secure the border. We can't sit here for 2.5 years getting inundated. So my call is we push back, declare an invasion, do our part to secure the border. And look, frankly, when Governor Abbott did the stuff with the inspections, guess what? All of a sudden the Mexican governor's like, whoa, hold on a second, that's a problem. Well, let's go back to that well. Like, why are we just allowing Mexico to just keep sending traffic up and make money on our dollars coming up through I-35? And why are we allowing hundreds of millions of dollars to go from people in America being sent back to Mexico? Let's constrain that and force them to the table.
I know a lot of us were excited when some of those policies got announced, and one of the benefits was that's the first time you ever saw Mexico actually squirm.
Right.
Unfortunately, what we've now gone back is we've looked at the numbers and realized as soon as Texas said, well, we're going to stop the inspections, the flow started again, right?
Yep.
So we had this very small victory, but it showed that when we stand up, we actually can stem the tide. And
never take a hostage you're not willing to shoot, and that's an old Phil Graham adage. And if you're gonna go threaten that, do it, right? And just give a date certain and say, you guys are going to secure the border, you're going to stop the flow, you're going to stop the caravan, or you're not going to ship your goods to America. I realize what that means with inflation skyrocketing, with American people hurting. I get it, but we need to shake things loose, and we need to hold Mexico accountable and stop the flow.
Last question. If Republicans take over, we assume you're not going to be giving Sheila Jackson Lee or Nancy Pelosi any chairmanships in the U.S. Congress. Is that correct? Or do you know if leadership's thinking about doing that?
Well, I know that there are a lot of conversations underway about what committees should look like, and the fact that there have been a number of Republicans who have been pushed aside. My friends, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Paul Gosar. The way that Democrats have been running the House with a heavy hand. We go through metal detectors. We were forced to wear masks for a while. A lot of us fought that, famously, and there's some litigation going and all of these things. The proxy voting. They've just been destroying the House of Representatives. I think we need to get back in power. I think we need to set the standards. I think we ought to be able to be armed on the floor of the House. I think we ought to be able to come and go. There shouldn't be metal detectors. The American people should be able to come back. We shouldn't have proxy voting. We should make sure that committees are representative of the people that are sent there. And there might be a few reprisals, but we got to get through the elections first, and we got to have good, strong leadership.
A big discussion happening literally today and tomorrow at the convention is whether or not, I know the Republican Party has taken a position that Democrats in the Texas House should stop getting so many chairmanships. 40% of the committees in the Texas legislature are chaired by Democrats, and you, as somebody who knows the legislative process, know how much power that gives the minority party. Is that something you think, and sometimes, in fact, they've said this during the last debate 2 years ago, a bunch of Republicans stood up and they said, hey, we give away all these chairmanships because we don't want to be like Washington, D.C. So do you believe that in Washington, D.C., if you gave Democrats all these chairmanships, it would be a better place? What do you think when it comes to the legislative priority as well, when it comes to banning Democrat chairs?
Look, I can say with clarity in D.C., if you would never give the gavel to Democrats in D.C., it would be insane. You just wouldn't do that. Is Jim Jordan going to say, oh, you know what, I don't want to be Judiciary Chair. Here you go, Jerry Nadler. Were you out of your mind?
Yep.
It's so. But from my standpoint, I look at it through this lens. Let's set the goal as conservatives of what we demand and expect out of the Texas legislature, and then say, do what you need to do to make that happen. You can have whatever you want as committee chairs. I think we can fight that out. I have my feelings about it. But let's go set the marker. You are going to give us school choice. You are going to hold schools accountable. You are going to put cops on the street. You aren't going to let Austin become San Francisco. You are going to secure the border. You are going to cut property taxes. I want Texas to be as strong as we pretend it is. We should actually be standing up and leading this country, and that starts in the legislature, and it requires us in Washington to do our part to get Washington out of the way. But it is time for Texas to lead again.
Chip, we really appreciate all that you do in Congress. There are very few voices that are willing to, day in and day out, continue to actually speak what the people are feeling. And I think that's why you enjoy the support of so many people, not only in your congressional district, but all across the state of Texas. And I'm grateful that you would sit down with us today.
No, thank you. Thanks for what you all do to shed the light on what's going on in Austin, D.C., and everywhere else.